We have found evidence that proves the existence of Noah's Ark. The SPLC is funding the KKK, and over 130 million Americans can't read above a sixth grade level. All of this and more on this episode of the Reconciled podcast. All right, guys, I am recording this on Thursday. It'll probably come out tomorrow, but I hope you guys are having an awesome and blessed week. I hope you are spending time in the Word, which is your sword. It's how you defend yourself against the attacks of the enemy and encourage yourself throughout life. There's nothing that I love more than getting up in the morning, early in the morning hours. And I haven't always been able to do that as a mom, but I'm in a season where I can right now, even though it's still not easy. It's still a sacrifice, but I get up early before my kids. I sit in the quiet and I spend time with God. I spend time in the Word. I spend time in prayer. So I hope you are doing that this week. And if not, be sure to do it because it's going to fill you up and we need it. We need it. We're in a spiritual battle every single day. So we need to be ready for Christ's returning and we need to be spending time with Him. So please do that. But also, I want to start this week with some good news that I just found so fascinating. I saw it when we were scrolling some YouTube shorts last night. Me and my husband usually watch a YouTube video or two before we go to bed at night, and I came across this one and I just thought it was so awesome. So check it out.
This one, a team of American researchers working in the high mountains of Turkey have uncovered what appear to be hidden tunnels similar to the descriptions of the biblical account of Noah's Ark.
Our next guest says his newly found evidence can prove that Noah's Ark did in fact exist, turning this biblical mystery into a reality. Joining us now from Turkey is one of those researchers from Noah's Ark Scans, Andrew Jones.
Thank you for having me on. Yes, greetings from the mountains of Ararat, where the Bible says the Ark landed. I'm about 1 mile from the Iranian border, and in this remote area, this boat formation was discovered in 1959. But our new research has shown that there are tunnels about 4 meters down and about 2 meters high going down the center of the boat and on the inside edge of the hull shape. And so we really believe that this layout showing tunnels and also possible support beams and walls would suggest that it's a man-made object and not just a natural formation.
Yeah, many geologists disagree with that. They say, look, this is just a natural formation. But gosh, Andrew, when I look at that, it doesn't look very natural to me. What's your response to those geologists?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to explain how did an earthen formation get into the shape of a ship, and that is exactly 300 cubits long, which is the length given in the book of Genesis in the Bible. And so we have the exact length, we have the ship shape, and we're in the right location. And now we're also seeing that the soil inside is different from right outside the formation. So we have 3 times more organic matter found inside versus right outside. So it's a distinct object and not just part of the mountainside.
Okay, I just thought that was so awesome. I mean, we've talked about this a lot on the show. I wrote an article for Holy Week for Here Are the Headlines, where I talked about was Holy Week an actual historical event, and I just love apologetics. You guys know that. And guys, God has given us so much evidence for what He says is true, for the Bible being true. There has never been an archaeological discovery that has disproven the Bible. There's only been tons and tons of discoveries that have proven the Bible, and this is just another one. You're telling me that the exact place the Bible says that this giant ark landed, and you're just telling me that on top of this mountain there just happens to be this formation that looks exactly like a boat and fits the description of what the Bible said the ark was like. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to go with a logical answer, which is that this is where the ark landed. And that is incredible that God, it's already clear through His creation, as we read in Romans 1, that He exists and that He made us, He created everything, and yet He still leaves us just a vast amount of evidence if we are willing to see that. So I wanted to start with some fun and some good news. I'm going to try to do that more often because I know we talk a lot about heavy things on the show, but they're important because we need to expose lies, and that is the primary purpose that I feel like God has called me to right now is exposing lies. And also, I think this fits into it because I really love apologetics and I love to speak about that as well. And just by the power of the Holy Spirit, convince you that Jesus is the only way and that you need to believe in God. Okay, let's shift gears and let's talk about the statistic that came out the other day. I saw this from Here Are the Headlines. Here's her post that 130 million Americans can't read above a sixth grade level. So, this is what her post says. The data is in, according to the latest PIAAC data from the National Center for Education Statistics, approximately 28% of U.S. adults ages 16 to 74 scored at the lowest literacy levels, level 1 or below, in 2023, a sharp increase from 19% in 2017. So post-COVID, I think that's interesting to note. While broader estimates indicate that over 54%, roughly 130 million adults read below a sixth grade level. This is functional low literacy, which involves difficulty with everyday tasks like locating information in text or completing simple forms, affects both U.S.-born and immigrant populations, with notable geographic variation, showing higher rates in parts of the South and Southwest. So I did see some comments on here talking about, well, what about immigration? What about immigrants and that population? How is this affecting this? Yes, of course it does affect this, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a massive problem. And we're going to get into a little bit more about the Department of Education, about teachers' unions and the corruption we found in those, and how what they're spending money on doesn't really match this statistic and the honestly education crisis we are in America that I am learning more and more about as I start to educate my own children. You guys know we do a homeschool co-op, so I don't do full-time homeschooling, but I was very particular about what they would be learning in school and what we teach, and I'm starting to supplement a little bit with my oldest about history and apologetics, and to look at the stark difference on the way that we teach children today versus 100 years ago, or the education that produced people like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. We think we're getting better and we kind of have this elitist view towards previous generations, but I don't think we're doing great. I really don't. And this kind of bears that out. So, and then she put on here as well, if you don't follow her, you need to. I love her account. She knows so much about history. The average sixth grader in the mid 1800s would have been expected to read the Bible, the Pilgrim's Progress, and a variety of Shakespeare. And now we have a society that reads maybe a book a year. Okay. Yeah. This is an indictment on the education system in America, and it's embarrassing considering how wealthy we are as a nation. We should be worlds beyond other nations, and we're not doing hot. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about also was just the DOE and the background of some of the controversy around it and teachers unions. What are they doing to affect change in this area? Are they doing anything at all? Or do they just continue to ask for more money even though they're producing results like this? Maybe you can tell by my face which answer is correct. But let's talk about it. So currently, the budget for the Department of Education is $134.93 billion annually. That is billion with a B. I can't even wrap my head around that amount of money. I think it comes out to about 1% of our annual budget as a nation. So the average salary of a teachers union president is $186,000. Pretty high. That's definitely, I wouldn't even call that middle class. I would call that upper class. I don't know exactly what the range is. The head of the National Education Association, which is a huge labor union in the United States that represents teachers, along with the next one I'm going to tell you about, American Federation of Teachers. So both of the heads of those, the NEA, that head makes $481,161. And I think this was from a couple years ago, so it could be even more now. I'm sure that they're giving themselves raises as they do. And then the head of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, made $499,874. These this is not like supposed to be a private company. I don't have a problem with people getting wealthy off of companies that they build and they make. These are people that are supposed to be serving public servants. That is their role. Their whole mission is supposedly about helping teachers, advocating for them in policy, and helping students and making sure that education is quality in the United States of America. That's supposed to be their role. And they're making $500,000, $500,000 a year for this. And yet we have horrible scores when it comes to reading and math and core subjects in school. The average teacher salary, and to see the difference here, is $46,526 a year. Guys, you can't live off that. You cannot live off of that. If you're a single income, if you're a single teacher trying to live off that, there's no way. We struggle, and my husband has a very successful business. We make more than we ever have, and yet we're still struggling because it is so expensive just to lead a very normal life in the United States of America. So what do you see the difference here? So we've got the heads of these labor unions that are supposed to be advocates for teachers, and then we've got the teachers that are living paycheck to paycheck and having a hard time getting by. If you are a servant, you should make a servant salary. That's a big problem even in our government. I don't want people struggling if they're serving us, like congressmen or, even pastors. We see this principle that people that give their life to full-time ministry, they should receive double honor. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want people to like struggle if they're trying to serve us, but $500,000 or what Congress makes, and especially what they make even when they're shutting down the government and then some of our military members are not getting taken care of? Sorry, no. What about firemen, police, and the ambulance system? All of those people are public servants being underpaid, and we're spending money on these ridiculous $1 million murals in our city. All of that eats me up. It makes me crazy because they just do lip service to these people. They don't actually care about them or really advocate for them. They advocate for themselves, and we're going to see more of that in a moment. But it seems to me that the only people getting raises and doing really well and living high on the hog are the people at the top of these labor unions. So in the 1860s, the Department of Education was founded with a budget of $15,000 and 4 employees, and they handled education fact-finding. So it was simple. But as we've seen with anything where government enters into a sphere that they're not meant to be in, which I would say is education. I don't think the federal government has any need to be involved in that or to have their hands in that. And actually, I posted several weeks ago about how all of the evil regimes, especially of the 20th century, but I'm sure it's not new because there's nothing new the more I learn, all of these regimes, they took over education of children because they know that children's minds are malleable and that they can be influenced easily and they can be manipulated and indoctrinated with whatever they want to indoctrinate them with. So I don't think the federal government should have any hand in that. And I'm sure that our founding fathers also probably did not intend for that to be the case. The whole point of America was to have small federal government. We didn't want a king. We don't want a bloated government. And then that's always what happens, especially for some reason, it seems, with things like NGOs or unions that supposedly have these social justice agendas that are out to set the world right and create this utopia and justice for the man. And they're fighting, the billionaires and the corporations. But in reality, they're not. They're really shaking hands with them behind closed doors, and they're making way more money than the people that they're supposed to be advocating for. So that's how it started in the 1860s. By 1965, the Office of Education had more than 2,100 employees and a budget of $1.5 billion. As of mid-2010, the department has nearly 4,300 employees and a budget of about $60 million. I don't know the amount of employees that they have now. I'm sure it's more. Although I know Trump was trying to cut it some when he got into office. I don't really have any updates on that. So maybe next time I can give you an update on that. But now we're looking at a budget of $139 billion. And do you know why? It's because of money. It's because of the love of money, because people get into these things and they realize how much money they can make, and they're going to do whatever they can to protect that, including emotionally manipulate society. And then we have this bloat and this overspending. And when we're in billions, trillions of dollars of debt, whatever it is at this point, and children can't read or do math, that should be the most basic thing that you learn at school. I mean, 100 years ago, we were teaching children Latin and we had rigid requirements, and now it's all about feelings and emotion. But if people cannot come out of school knowing how to read and do math, what are we doing? What are we doing? If you had a job where you're making $139,000 a year, I'm taking a fraction of what the Department of Education makes, and I'm going to give you an illustration, okay? So if you made $139,000 a year and your job performance is absolutely terrible, and your boss comes to you and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? You're not producing, you're not making us any money, the results are really bad. What do you need from us?" Like, let's say they're trying to be kind of nice and see what they can do to help you, because they've already established this and they really they want you to succeed, and you're already trained and all that, and they've spent money on you. Okay. So they're trying to help you out. And they're like, what do you need from us? And you say, "You know what? I think what would really help me is if you gave me more money." Are you joking? You make more than most Americans by far, and you're saying you need more money? That's crazy. That boss should fire you if that's what you say, because you're completely ineffective and probably corrupt, and you really just want to collect a paycheck. Not to mention, under the Biden administration, the Department of Education, along with these labor unions for teachers, were pushing the trans agenda. So this was in June of 2023. It was reported that Attorney General Paxton sued the Department of Education for issuing arbitrary and capricious guidance that unlawfully extended the Title IX to include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes. This would have forced Texas schools and universities to allow biological males to use women's restrooms, locker rooms, and sex specific spaces. Any Texas school refusing to follow the mandate risked losing federal education funding. Guys, the Biden administration not only did this, they also tried to take away SNAP lunches from poor children from public schools that would not implement their insane gender ideology and their gender bending of children, and allowing boys and girls sex specific spaces like locker rooms where they have to change. They will stop at nothing to get their way. And then the second Republicans use a little bit of force or power for something that is actually good and actually protects people and actually helps people, they cry about it. And I just don't want to hear it, because you are willing to take lunches from poor kids to support your political ideology. And tell me, what does this have to do with supporting education in the United States of America, that you want to force boys and girls spaces and their sports? Your job is to make sure that children are being educated, not to push a political agenda. And teachers' unions were right alongside them doing this, along with pushing these horrible and very harmful COVID policies, masking children, making them sit outside, just completely decimating their education. And I wonder if that has something to do with the spike that we saw from, I think it said 2017 to now. It's ridiculous that this is what they're spending their time on. Okay, so I also want to share with you a couple of stories specifically about teachers' unions, just to show you, just to scratch the surface of what is going on in teachers' unions. This is a very, very small window into what's going on behind the scenes and what these organizations are actually about. And also, teachers' unions, 90% of their contributions to campaigns since 1990 have gone to Democrats. And in 2024, it was over 98% of their contributions, which, by the way, is millions of dollars. So this is an extreme difference here in what we are funding. And my question is, why are labor unions even funding a political party at all? You have to ask yourself this question. If their job is to advocate for better salaries for teachers, for better classroom learning environments, and to protect children in their education, why are we funding the Democratic Party who ran on aborting children, transitioning children's gender, taking children away from their parents if they wouldn't transition them, that wants them to only think about sex and how they feel and put pornographic novels in their libraries? Why are labor unions, teachers' unions, funding the Democratic Party? These are just all really good questions that we need to ask ourselves. And teachers, stop funding these unions. They don't care about you. They don't care about you having a better life or a better salary. So this is a story out of Jacksonville, Florida. This was from the First Coast News. The women who ran Jacksonville's teacher union for nearly a quarter century are both headed to prison for cheating the union out of $2.6 million, a federal judge ruled February 9th. Terry Brady and Ruby George pleaded guilty in 2025 to selling back Duval Teachers United thousands of days more vacation time than they possessed. Let me say that again. Thousands of days more vacation time than they possessed from respective careers as president and executive vice president of a union with more than 5,000 members. Okay. The next story, I could go on all day, but the next story, this is out of Chicago. Both of our next stories are out of Chicago. The Chicago public school system, it was found, spent $7.7 million on international trips in 2024. Why is that the priority when only a quarter of children in this public school system are proficient in math? Just, again, asking questions. I'm just asking questions. All right, check out this video.
The findings: employees at the cash-strapped district spent millions on trips to Las Vegas and even overseas. What is up with this? Mike Tobin is live there in the Windy City. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Dave. The Inspector General took a look at the travel expenses of teachers and principals in the Chicago public school systems and concluded that when the bank accounts were fat with COVID money, the staff ran wild. As you mentioned, trips to Egypt, Finland, Hawaiian resorts, even one on a safari, and there was no oversight to stop them. The amount spent on travel in 2021 was $300,000. It jumped up in 2022 to $3.4 million, doubled in 2023, and kept getting bigger in 2024. The report concludes that more scrutiny was put to whether the expense paperwork was done correctly than whether the expenses were excessive. As a result, more than 90% of the traveling employees went over the allowable limits. Oftentimes, lodging and airfare was double the allowable rate. One of the reasons the trips were not rejected is that they were not asking for approval. Of 15 international trips noted by the Inspector General, 12 were never submitted for approval. And then we start seeing wildlife trips, balloon rides, staff staying extra days for personal reasons, and this in a school district that claims a $700 million budget hole.
So I'm just making sure you heard the last part where he said this public school system, they report a $700 million budget hole, but they spent $7.7 million on trips to Egypt and Hawaii and hot air balloon rides. Okay, this is completely absurd. And not to mention, this the way that we're even teaching children now. Over 80% of schools have switched to SEL, which is social emotional learning, where we're teaching kids more about feelings than math and reading and history. And how is that working out for us? And then, we also have this concept of child-centered learning, which again, these things, they always kind of sound good because it came out of the era of No Child Left Behind and principles and policies like that. But in reality, what ends up happening is very similar to DEI. We're lowering standards across the board to try to get everyone to an equal outcome. And we are not all the same. We don't all have the same capacities, the same intellect, the same giftings. That doesn't make any single human being less than, but we cannot lower the standards and give everyone an award when we just simply don't have the same abilities. And there's certain people that should go on to be doctors, and there's certain people that shouldn't. There's certain people that are going to be gifted in, labor type of jobs, or like my husband has a service-based business. You can make really good money in that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also just different passions in life, and we don't all have the same path. And when you're trying to force that, this is what happens. Children suffer. Children are being taught just to feel their way through life, and it's not good for them. We talked about this, that 23% of Gen Z now identify as LGBTQ. We've got a huge percentage of Americans that can't read. But yes, let's talk more about feelings. Do you see how sneaky this is, and how tricky it is, and how manipulative it is? And in reality, it's all about protecting their own salaries and getting to take extravagant trips on the dime of these teachers that are barely getting by, and contributing to these unions and trusting these unions to advocate for them. And it's all about them. That's what really this is about. And so we have another story out of Chicago. Let me play this video for you.
To a story we told you about at 5 o'clock. We reported about the Chicago Teachers Union demanding to cancel school on May Day. And now we're hearing from multiple members of the CPS school board that tell our political reporter, Mary Ann Ahern, that the CPS CEO has changed her mind and will agree to close school on May 1st. CTU filed a grievance, and the board in closed session decided on making May 1st a no student attendance day. Still no official word from CPS, but we're of course going to follow it.
So again, in this public school system, where these people that lead these organizations are responsible for stewarding the education of these children, only a quarter of the kids under their oversight are proficient in math, and they want to shut school down. Your child can't come to school so that they can go to an anti-ICE protest. That's what they see as important, more important than your child's education or fixing the problem that they have. But it's all about just give me more, give us more, feed us more money, less oversight. We don't want anybody looking into what we're doing. We haven't even gotten into the Stop Nick Shirley Act, which is totally ridiculous. And I am praying that that does not pass, because they just want to shut down free speech. They don't want to be exposed. That's why they hated Doge, because they don't want to be audited. Think about that. They don't want the American public to be able to audit them and to see what they're doing. They just want you to shut up and pay your taxes, pay your dues, and let them keep wasting your money on these ridiculous agendas that they're also pushing on your children. This isn't an education system or an education association or a labor union. This is a political action arm of the leftist Marxist agenda. This is not about children. This is not about teachers. This is simply about protecting their salaries. And this is in part why we chose to homeschool and to make sure that our children receive a Christian education. I have a lot of friends that I respect that have chosen differently, and I understand all of the reasons why. But I just want to lovingly say and encourage you that I think that Christian children, or really all children, but Christian children especially, should receive a Christian education, because God says there's no fence, there's no middle ground that you can sit in. Everything is either for God or against God. Everything that we teach our children, everything in every way that they're discipled or indoctrinated, everything ultimately comes down to a spiritual idea, and an idea that opposes God or that aligns with God. And so we need to be really careful to see the value in the education of our children. Again, that's why these evil regime rulers chose to circumvent education of children, because they know the importance of it. We need to know the importance of it. And so we need to ask the question of, should the federal government even have its hand in educating children? I don't believe so. Could you say that, these local, smaller schools that are privately funded, Maybe they receive grants, but I know some people are very unwilling to even entertain that because they think that once the grants start, then you've got the government oversight. And I get all of that. I'm just saying mostly privately funded schools. Yeah, I mean, I think those are fine as long as you know what your child is actually learning. Make sure it's actually a Christian education. But, and we chose to do that. But I just think that we've really gotten way off course on how we educate our children and how we understand the importance of that. And even for me, there are days where, I could be doing this full time. I could be going downtown all the time. I could spend more time on content. I really don't edit a lot. Sorry, you guys. I know I do my best and I know it's come a long way, but it's not great. It's not professional quality. I could spend a lot more time on this and send my kids to school, or I could send them to school. I could get another job. It would help us pay off debt faster, go on more vacations. There's so many reasons that it would make sense in a way to send my kids to public school. But ultimately, I know that their education is so important. Deuteronomy 6, where God says, when you lie down, when you walk along the path, when you sit and eat together, teach them these things. And so I do think it is very important for them to have a Christian education and for us to be very cautious of who we are allowing to educate our children because they are so impressionable and malleable at a young age. And we want to give them that good, solid foundation to go out into the world. I don't think that a kindergartner should be a missionary sent out into a public school system. And I know I always have to say this, but I know there are great teachers out there. I know some of them personally. They're wonderful teachers. It's not about you, though, because this is a top-down structure. You can't prevent. I mean, you can obviously, I think you should advocate for children if you're able and you are a public school teacher, but you can't fully prevent, most likely, pornographic novels being put in your library at your school. You can argue against that, and I hope that you do. But there are certain things that you just cannot control, and that I decided, and my husband decided with me, that we were unwilling to risk when it came to our children. And we've really enjoyed it, and we've seen some of the fruits of that. And it's not easy. It really isn't easy. It stretches you in ways that other things don't, like having a traditional job, staying home with your children. And it's a good thing. It is a blessing. I mean, people see it as oppression, but I get to, especially on the days they're home, I get to wake up when we want, have a slow breakfast, go sit outside in the sunshine with my kids. I was thinking that the other day. We had, the pool's out already because it's getting hot here on some days. And they were just playing, and I was just sitting out in the sun in the middle of the day. And I thought, I'd much rather be doing this than sitting in an office. I find that oppressive and this really wonderful. So, yes, there are hard parts about it, but we don't need to avoid everything that's hard. It makes us a better person. So I just wanted to encourage you to be very careful with your child's education. All right, before we move on, I want to take a quick second and just remind you that we have affiliate links that you can go and shop, and it helps us out. It supports us and the show. And so, of course, we have We Heart Nutrition. I've been taking their supplements more regularly. I'm taking their Wholesome Balance. I think that's the name of it for women. It's a hormonal balance. And I will let you guys know how that goes to see if that helps at all. And in a couple months, I'll even be getting some more lab work done. So we'll see what that looks like at the time. And then I take their women's multivitamin, and I've taken their iron in the past, and I just love their supplements. I love supporting a company that is Christian based, that supports my values, and also makes really high quality products. If you didn't know this, a lot of vitamins, you're not even able to absorb a lot of them because they're not bioavailable. And We Heart Nutrition does everything they can to provide you with the most bioavailable ingredients. So please go check that out. I will put the link in the show notes as always. And also, I have a new account called Ko-fi. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure if it's Ko-fi or Ko-fi. We're just going to go with Ko-fi because it kind of sounds like coffee. But I set this up. You can go and make a one-time donation, or you can also set up a recurring monthly donation. Even if it's $5 or $10, it would help and bless me so much because it takes a lot of time and resources and money to run things like this. I've got subscription costs and edit, I have to pay for an editor and subscriptions for social media and things like that. So it really does help, and I would appreciate it so much. So if this show has blessed you in any way, please go ahead and follow that link and you can donate. So thank you so much. All right, lastly on the show, I want to talk about this story, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC. So this was a headline that came out yesterday, I believe. The DOJ charges the Southern Poverty Law Center with wire fraud, false statements, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. So their whole mission, the SPLC, is to supposedly raise money to fight and dismantle violent extremist groups. And yet it came out that they have been sending money to the KKK and other violent extremist racial hate groups. And so they're actually responsible for staging some of the crimes that they've been using to stir up strife and division in society, to push things like critical race theory, to tell Black people that they are victims and that it's just the system is against them and they've got to fight the man. And it turns out they've actually been funding some of these things. But here is the video of Kash Patel reading these charges.
What the general just told you. The Southern Poverty Law Center, in a massive sweeping indictment, has been charged with allegations of fraud and using the banking system to perpetrate that fraud. I just want to talk about a couple of brief things here. The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. I just want to say that again. They used the fraudulently raised money by lying to their donor network, thousands of Americans, to go ahead and actually pay the leadership of these supposed violent extremist groups. The groups, as the general laid out, include the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Unite to Right, National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, the Aryan Nation Motorcycle Club, and the National Socialist Party of America, and also the American Front. In at least one of these matters, our investigation revealed that funds were used to facilitate the commission of further state and federal offenses, totaling over $3 million. Furthermore, our investigation revealed that the Southern Poverty Law Center, on top of perpetuating this widespread, decade-long, multi-million-dollar fraud, conducted more criminal activity. They attempted to hide their criminal activity from our financial banking network. They set up shell companies and entities around America so that the financial institutions that we rely on as everyday Americans were deceived in believing that money was not coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the perpetration of this scheme and fraud, but rather fictitious entities they stood up to perpetuate this ongoing fraud. This is a serious and egregious violation of a group that purported to dismantle violent extremist groups, but in turn actually only fueled the hatred.
This was something that Marxism taught, was that you had to create a crisis in order to divide people. And that's what critical race theory has been in the United States of America. And this claim that if you're white, you're inherently racist and you need to apologize for your skin color, teaching Black Americans that they're really just the victim. This is how you pit people against each other and create national crises, and you create division that causes hate and hate crimes. But again, we're finding out that they actually funded some of these hate crimes. So I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the history behind the SPLC, not even including what they've just been indicted on. You have to be so careful of who you're listening to, who you are learning from, and what politicians are aligning themselves with. Per the indictment, an SPLC field source was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, made racist postings under SPLC supervision, and helped coordinate transportation to the event. So this was the event in Charlottesville that the comments that Trump made about that there were, what did he say? There were wonderful people on both sides, essentially, something like that, that was taken out of context and was spread by the media to say that, oh, Trump is calling these white nationalist, actually racist groups very, great people. And that's what they kept saying over and over and over again. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've heard that anytime I talk about Trump. Even if it has nothing to do with this, people want to bring that up. And it's kind of died down now, but it went on for a long time. I was sick of hearing about it, and it was taken out of context. That's not what he was talking about. This was over a statue that was being taken down and considered unlawful. But then, as we can see here, the SPLC was actually funding and helping coordinate transportation to this event. And at this event, this was reported by Times Magazine. Violence erupted in the college town of Charlottesville on August 12th. This was in 2017. I don't remember if I said that. After hundreds of white nationalists and their supporters who gathered for a rally over plans to remove a Confederate statue were met by counter-protesters, leading Virginia's governor to declare a state of emergency. So the counter-protesters and protesters are who Trump was talking about there. And the counter-protesters weren't all white nationalists. Some of these people just don't want the history of America torn down every time someone is offended by it. And so, we can debate about that another time, because all of our founding fathers, every great person, even MLK, some of their past is not what we would prefer, and ours will be the same way. We will make bad decisions, and that doesn't mean that you just tear down the entire person or any good that they did. Sometimes, sure, I'm not interested in hearing what Hitler did well, but we're not talking about Hitler here. We're talking about some of the men that founded America and their background. So this was also the Times. It said clashes broke out between the white nationalists and counter-protesters. The Unite the Right rally at a park once named for Confederate General Robert E. Lee was deemed unlawful. So this is the statue that everyone was up in arms about and fighting about. At one point in the afternoon, a vehicle drove into a crowd of counter-protesters marching through the downtown area before speeding away, resulting in one death and leaving more than a dozen others injured. State police later reported the crash of a helicopter that was monitoring the events in Charlottesville, killing 2 troopers. So we've got 3 people dead as a result of the strife and division that SPLC had at least a part in stirring up in this area at this rally. So they are in part responsible for that. And do they care about that? No, of course they don't. They only care about their political agenda, going so far as to fund the groups that they say they are trying to dismantle. And the acting AG, Todd Blanche, said the SPLC is manufacturing racism to justify its existence. Using donor money to allegedly profit off Klansmen cannot go unchecked. And I would agree with him. If there really were hate crimes and racism all across America, you would not have to fund these events or create these shell companies to hide your funding and pose these hate crimes in order to justify your existence and your cause. You wouldn't have to do that. You could just report on reality. But the problem is, it's just not reality. And I'm not saying all racism. Obviously, I know there are real racists in the United States, including this part of this group that was in Charlottesville that day. But it's not the norm for the everyday American. So here are a couple of other things that have happened with the SPLC over the years. The Federalist reported the Republican National Committee is set to approve a resolution at its meeting in Charlotte, refuting the legitimacy of the Southern Poverty Law Center to identify hate groups, saying the group puts conservative groups or voices at risk of an attack. I believe this was back in 2015. I'll have to pull that up in the article. But while the resolution denounces the organization as a whole, it specifically focuses on the Obama-Biden administration's relationship with the group, which allowed its leaders to give advice and provide guidance to the Department of Homeland Security. So the SPLC is giving advice, its leaders, to the Obama-Biden admins, Department of Homeland Security. The same people sending millions of dollars to Ku Klux Klan members and these other hate groups and Aryan groups. That's great. It also highlights an SPLC-inspired shooting at a conservative organization that the group labeled as a designated hate group over 8 years ago. So this actually happened on August 15th, 2012. A man armed with a 9mm handgun, 50 rounds of ammunition, and 15 Chick-fil-A sandwiches arrived at the Family Research Council, a notably conservative group headquarters in Washington, with the intent to kill as many as possible and smear the Chick-fil-A sandwiches in victims' faces and kill the guard. What insanity is this? So what kind of depravity is this? He said, "It's not about you," the man told the security guard. "I don't like these people and I don't like what they stand for." So he's going to shoot them and rub food in their face? This is disgusting. This is the kind of hate that these groups perpetuate and create. The shooter was quickly subdued by the security guard, Leonardo Johnson, but not before firing off a few shots. Later, the shooter clarified his statements to the FBI, saying that he was targeting anti-gay organizations as designated by the SPLC. He also incorporated Chick-fil-A in his plan due to their professed stances on the issue. Somehow, this always comes back to these same Marxist groups, critical race theory also supporting critical gender theory and these transgender ideologies. And maybe you're asking yourself how that happens, but I just think that there's the similar enemy of your enemy is your friend kind of mentality going on. And it's just basically anything but Christianity and biblical truth. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So they're able to link arms in their common hatred of Christianity and the truth and biological reality. I mean, this man was deranged, and he was incited by the SPLC specifically because they claimed that this was a hate group and they stir all of this up. This is Andy No on X. He reported that a far-left nonprofit, the SPL Center, that claims to fight white supremacy, let go of 25% of their staff. This was several years ago. Many of the people it employed in recent years are extremists, including one indicted in an Antifa terrorism RICO case. I recap the SPLC's disgraceful history, and so he was retweeting SPLC Union on X, and they said today SPL Center, an organization that with nearly $1 billion in reserves, given an F rating by Charity Watch for quote hoarding donations, gutted its staff by a quarter. This really comes down to greed and emotional manipulation. It's the same thing as with the teachers' unions and the Department of Education. They were given an F by Charity Watch for hoarding donations, and that was a claim here by SPLC Union. But, I mean, can you not see through it yet? Can you not see through these agendas and what these people are really all about? They don't care about Black people or marginalized groups or immigrants or poverty. This is not a war on poverty. If it really was, then they should be the first to give up their salaries and their $1 million mansions, just like BLM, and all these donations to drag queens and these ridiculous NGOs. This is not about poverty. This is about fighting Christianity and truth and getting rich off of that. And they don't want to lose that. So they will do anything in their power to get around that and to protect themselves and their own money. And that's why in, 1 Timothy, it says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Just like, I don't know if you heard this part of Kash Patel saying this, if I played it or not, but he said, the money never lies. Just follow the money. And that is so true. If you ask the question, why would they do this? Just follow the money and see how rich they get off of emotionally manipulating Americans that are well-meaning but are misguided. And that's your daily reminder to read your Bible today, because the Bible speaks to all of these issues. It speaks to everything. There's nothing that we face in society today that is new under the sun, that is a surprise to God, all of these same sins. They just keep repeating in cycles throughout history. But it's not hopeless. We expose these things for a reason. We can correct these things. We can turn. God says, humble yourselves. Pray, seek my face, my people. It doesn't have to be all of these unbelievers and these corrupt government officials or these NGO leaders. It doesn't have to be them. It has to be us. We have to repent, humble ourselves, turn and seek the Lord. And he says he can heal our land. So there is hope, Christian. Never lose sight of that. Never lose hope in the Lord, because our government could fall apart. And sometimes it feels like it very well may do that. But we have the hope of the Lord and eternity, and that Jesus will come back and that he will set up his government, and it will be in perfect righteousness. And he is our wonderful counselor, and the government will be on his shoulders. And then there will be no more tears, no more sadness. For all of eternity, we will be with our Savior. All right, that's all we have time for today. I hope you guys have an awesome week. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share this, please. The algorithm on YouTube is so rough right now. They will not show my content to anybody. So please just hit the share button, send it to a friend, like it, subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen, Apple, Spotify, wherever. And I will see you guys next week.